worries, man. No worries. I'm pretty good actually. Just about 20 minutes ago, the heating got fixed in my building, so I've been living in a very cold apartment for the past 4 days.
Oh, dude, I thought with all of this AI innovation and working in an impact fund, this wouldn't be an issue.
I would imagine, yeah. I mean, I still have to, yeah. Maybe we could have hit up one of our portfolio companies doing HVAC optimization, but yeah, no, it's quite crazy. All of a sudden, just cold water and heating, just everything just turned off.
Does it take
Right
you
as it's
back to
getting
a
cold as
time
well.
before AI where we had to sit here and think, well, I have to fix things with my hands?
I mean, I was definitely definitely thinking about it and also reflecting on the choice to study business instead of some sort of more crafty discipline. But yeah, no, happy to be here. No, great to see you again, Raj.
Dude, it's an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person, but for the time being, I have a wonderful selection of questions for you. And I think first and foremost, where we have to start is 4impact. I haven't got a lot of context on it, so I would love some of that. But I think most importantly, the impact side. I was talking to a bundle of different venture capitalists around this and investors, and sort of the sentiment around impact is sort of it's turned into resilience, which is a flavor of defense, especially from a sovereignty POV. Thoughts?
I mean, to be honest, I do feel like I've definitely seen that. I mean, I talked to a lot of other impact investors as well, and so I feel like a lot of other people are also looking at that space. I mean, of course, we're also kind of aware of it, and I mean, actively screening the market for opportunities that, if we find something that aligns with our interests, then of course, I mean, that could be something for us to also look at. But yeah, of course, I mean, it's a bit of a step away from the kind of traditional do good side of impact. That being said, I mean, of course, if you're kind of ensuring that critical infrastructure, for instance, is able to operate under various circumstances, then of course, I mean, that still is a kind of impact. It's a little bit less easy to quantify than carbon emissions or some sort of burnout reduction or something like this. But I mean, I personally think that it's still definitely like an area where a lot of impact can be made. But yeah, I mean, it is a little bit of a strange addition to the mix, considering yeah, I mean, usually it's more about like a kind of specific positive impact as opposed to preventing something from potentially happening or increasing resilience, which is inherently quite it's a bit of an abstract thing at the end of the day.
It really is. And why would you want to spend time in a fund that does do good versus a fund chasing generational gains? I mean, like, look, let's be honest. They all want to do good for the world. I think that most people in venture think about the world like that, think about society like that, based off the discussions that I've had. But for you, what was the innate desire to say, like, right, impact fund is where I want to spend some of my time and learn some of the craft?
So I think, I mean, yeah, that's a good question. I have to say, I mean, there was an element of serendipity involved in it, of course, as well. So I mean,
Always.
I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that I specifically thought to myself. I mean, I knew I wanted to work in venture capital. I knew I wanted to work close to founders. I wanted to kind of support them in doing these things that these forming incredible technologies and deploying them and moving quickly. And that was kind of the thing that drew me into the sectors at large. But in terms of the impact side of things, I think my natural interest has always been things that are very impact aligned. So whether it be CO2 reduction or specifically, I guess, renewable energy penetration or enablement around new energy tech kind of being delivered into the market. So I think it was more like that I was just interested in those spaces, and that happens to align quite nicely with impact. And as such, I mean, I kind of ended up here. But I mean, the way that it comes to, I guess, like the return side of things, I mean, the way that we look at it at 4impact Capital is like, I mean, birth rates and such are going down massively. Depression is going up exponentially. The energy system is under this like incredible transition period. And I mean, if you're going to invest your money somewhere, you might as well align it with some sort of like a kind of a positive element, or kind of align yourself with these positive trends. So I do think that there's quite a lot of money to be made in funding these kinds of solutions. And of course, there's been quite a lot of success stories as well in the space. But yeah, I think if you're going to fund something, I mean, you might as well fund something that also creates like a good impact and potentially also a very attractive financial return. So I think, I mean, for me, I would struggle to put in a long day of work, funding the next agentic AI like customer service solution or something like this. I mean, I'm sure that some people might argue it as an impact there as well. Yeah.
At least it keeps the day interesting, right? Like you're jumping around from a whole bunch of renewable energies to what else sits within that?
So I mean, we look at it in terms of we look at it in terms of people and planet. So those are the two kind of broader categories for us. And I mean, so in terms of how to quantify that and how to categorize it, I mean, we have various verticals within those, but But effectively, like if we find two elements, it can be quite an attractive potential proposition for us, which is the founders are impact driven. They want to do something good. They want to actually make a bit of a difference in the world as opposed to just, scaling for the sake of scaling. And the second thing is, I mean, it has to be something where the solution is creating some sort of a societal good that ties into the revenue. So revenue goes up, so does the impact being made. So I think energy tech, for instance, is a great example of that, where, I mean, if you're enabling more people to take up residential home energy solutions, so solar panels, let's say battery storage energy systems, then, I mean, you're selling those, or you're kind of facilitating the sale of those in some way. You are effectively increasing the share of renewables in the system, but you're also growing revenue. So there's kind of a nice tie in there. And so we look for specifically solutions that, the founders have an impact desire and a kind of impact motivation, and then where the revenues just goes hand in hand with the impact being made.
With the fact that you look at Planet, do you think that with the rise of putting data centers in space, you might start turning some attention towards that, given that to power them, you may need a whole lot of solar?
Yeah, I mean, effectively, I mean, the way that we've looked at that previously is, I mean, so we're software-focused investors, so we look for solutions that kind of are able to, without kind of significant additional capex, able to kind of facilitate that process. And so, I mean, one of the investments we recently made was in a company called GreenShift, and so they're kind of focusing on the code level optimization around these data centers. So not so much actually upgrading or changing the infrastructure, but actually making sure that the code that you're putting into these kind of computing operations, that's actually running smoothly. It's not creating idle runtime, or it's not kind of having some weird inefficient loops or something like this. And so there's kind of a natural business tie-in and relationship with that as well. So of course, I mean, if your software runs leaner, then you're also consuming less energy in most cases. And if you're consuming less energy, then you're using less compute, and that's cheaper for you. So there's kind of like a very, very natural relationship between the kind of impact that's being made, and then also the kind of business incentives there as well. But so, yeah, no, I think it's a space that we continue to look at very closely. I think there's some very, very fascinating solutions there. And given that, today cloud computing consumes more energy than the entire aviation industry globally, it's a pretty interesting statistics, especially when, the industry is growing at something like 20% CAGR or something like this. So, it's not a problem that's going to go away on its own. And of course, there's going to be infrastructure kind of interventions that are going to be needed. But I do think that actually a lot of that could come from software, which aligns very nicely with what we look for then.
This is interesting. This is very interesting. Where do you like to spend your time in the context of impact?
I think, I mean, so previously I worked for Helen Ventures. This was an energy tech fund based out of Finland. We used to do European energy tech investments. I mean, some notable mentions. Virta, pretty big company nowadays. I think, quite a few hundred million revenue. Gradient, I think they raised a pretty substantial amount recently for Series B. Inspired, which is algorithmic ancillary services markets trading. I think they raised like a 40 million Series B recently, so that was also a pretty successful one. And so because of like the exposure to that space and kind of having spent quite a lot of time in energy tech, I do think that that's kind of continues to be one of those spaces that I'm most excited about. It's also one of the most transformative in a very practical sense. But that being said, I've actually recently been looking at healthcare as well quite a lot.
Okay, let's stick on the energy tech for a little bit. What do you know about energy tech that typically other people would have considered, like, wouldn't agree with you on?
So I think the complexity in this space is absolutely staggering. I think that, everyone and their grandmother is kind of looking at the space and talking about virtual power plants and merchant batteries and behind and front of the meter. And the amount of like complexity there is actually, I think in some cases, like massively kind of overestimated. I do think that people kind of understand the fact that, I mean, it is a complex system, and you need to have all these different assets kind of operating with very, very short kind of run times between each other and things like this. But it doesn't kind of, even just things like, where does this company, like the solution that's being pitched to you right now, where does it actually fit into the value chain of energy? Is it kind of overlapping with demand response? Is it overlapping with VPP functionalities? Is it are you replacing some sort of potential hardware element within the residential home? And so there's like so many different things that I feel like people don't really latch on to maybe enough, or they don't spend enough time on it. And so sometimes you see, companies that don't really seem to have much of a competitive moat kind of being funded. I don't want to name any names because I feel like I know all the investors involved in these, but there's a lot of complexity there, and I think that that's something that, because it's a hot topic, a lot of people are kind of have been jumping into it and continue to jump into it, and there seems to be space in the market, but it's a complex space.
Are there certain problems do you think that we won't solve in the short term?
Certain problems.
Yeah, like if there's certain problems that startups are working on, that companies are working on, that you think we actually won't sort in the short term, these problems are actually larger than what we think they are, and are going to operate on more like 10-year, 20-year time horizons.
Yeah, so I think, one of the kind of big things that I also kind of touched on a little bit in my previous mention of it was specifically like this demand response element, right? So
Right.
you have the TSO, the transmission system operator, then you have the distribution system operator, and then there's kind of like these local networks. And so electricity comes at like a really high frequency, like via this TSO system, goes into the DSO system, comes into kind of a local, like more substation style distribution within a residential zone. And so, for instance, that system it's not fragile because, of course, it's built to be incredibly resilient. But at the same time, like now you have intermittency around, sometimes you have a lot of energy coming in, sometimes you have a lot of demand for it. And that kind of creates these like hurdles that I think a lot of startups are trying to tackle. So whether that be via better infrastructure insights or better capacity to actually allocate either demand or supply of energy to actually stabilize the grid. So basically the grid needs to be stable. And so I think people don't quite realize this, but like pretty much, we're all taking part in the system, right? And we're all kind of contributing to that inefficiency in one way or another. And we're going to eventually pay the price in some capacity. And so I think the average consumer should be kind of more, I guess, well, first of all, I would encourage them to read a little bit about this, but then moreover, I would say they also need to remember that they really do play a part in this entire system. And so when they're charging their EV, there's opportunities for them to charge their electric vehicle, at a cheaper tariff, for instance, if they're optimizing for their kind of tariff consumption. But they don't really know much about it.
Do you not
There's
feel
a lot of
that
handholding
that
that's needed.
do you not feel like companies should just bake that into the software of the vehicle, as an example?
So, personally, I do think that actually could be an interesting thing for kind of the original equipment manufacturers, if you will, to actually do. That being said, I do think that a lot of these companies, while EVs are not like a completely new thing, it's still like a a newer industry than conventional combustion engine vehicles and such. And so I do think that there's kind of still a bit of a learning curve in some capacity for these companies to actually, see like where do they want to play, where do they want to allocate capital, and where are their kind of competitive moats and things like this emerging. And so I think in a lot of cases there's a risk of them kind of stretching themselves too thin. They're serving, let's say, too small of a market need at the moment versus, kind of potentially disregarding something that, they're much more competitive in. So kind of like a competitive strength, I guess, for focusing on one thing over the other. But yeah, no, I do think that in the long term that could be an option where effectively many of these companies should in some way start engaging, or at the very least kind of partnering with different entities within this value chain where it makes sense for them. And so kind of being open to that and making their APIs and things like this more open to these other companies to kind of build solutions on top of what they have, for instance. And so there's a lot of opportunities there, but of course, they also need to focus on what they're best at, right?
Do you think that founders that work building impact startups or building impact-focused companies have a different overview or outlook on the world compared to other startup founders?
I would say, the thing is, I think it all comes down to kind of identifying friction in the world around you,
Right.
and then and the kind of acting on it and understanding where you can alleviate friction, where you can, where more friction might be created in the future, things like this. And so I think, the kind of baseline is that founders understand friction. Impact founders see that friction as more of a mechanism by which, alleviating it actually creates some sort of social good. So it's more about like the focus on where the friction you're looking at is. If it's reaching out to more customers in your sales pipeline with more greater efficiency, and that's the friction that you feel and you associate with, all power to you, go for it. But I feel like if you're looking at the world a bit more broadly, I do think that you need to, I'm personally of the opinion that I feel like it's better to focus on the things that actually kind of matter a little bit more. But so yeah, I think that founders are all motivated by some sort of friction, and it just comes down to kind of selective focus around what the friction is that you want to solve.
Interesting, very interesting. This. I don't get to spend a lot of time with impact, people focusing on impact, and it's been enjoyable doing this, especially from a software perspective. We had on Unrest, we were live streaming from Unrest last week, which is an impact accelerator focused primarily more towards what I thought was CPG, and then figured out like actually software is included. But I do feel that those types of founders think about the world differently. They have a completely different style of outlook to the hardware founders, as an example. But there is a thread within all of this of I'm trying to change the world for good, and like there is a larger thinking about what society looks like in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely resonate with that as well. I mean, I think, I mean, one of these people kind of, let's say you're working on an energy tech solution of some kind, and you ask this founder like, okay, what motivates you? Like, what drives you to actually work those late nights and things like this, building your solution. And I feel like the answer to that is always so much more interesting when you're working on something impactful. So I mean, you want to make a better world for your kids or something like this, or you want to prevent some sort of harm that's currently being created, and I think that's a much more interesting conversation, I think, than someone who basically just wants a quick win or a quick exit or something like this. Well, of course, I think that's also very cool. And I mean, many of those people that do that, they actually end up becoming angel investors in various more impactful solutions. They become LPs in impact funds. So I do think that those people, of course, also have an incredibly vital place within the kind of venture capital and startup ecosystem. But it's more of a short-term thing, I think. And eventually, I feel like a lot of people do gravitate towards these like longer-term topics and kind of solving the problems around them in a broader sense.
What do you care about in the world?
I think, well-being. I mean, I think when it comes to, so one of the topics that I've been looking at a lot recently is healthcare. And so one of the things that I'm personally quite passionate about specifically is around enabling and supporting doctors and kind of being able to, well, effectively do their job with greater efficiency, reducing their burnout, things like this. And so, I mean, there's massive demand for various healthcare services. I mean, when it comes to things like obesity or heart disease, I mean, it's all been kind of going up. But at the same time, like the healthcare capacity of the world hasn't really been kind of, it hasn't been growing at that same rate. And so I feel like we're kind of moving slowly towards this horrible like crash moment of some kind where, I mean, we truly just have that much more people looking for healthcare services than actually people being able to provide them. And the last thing that you want at that point is for a bunch of doctors to be like quitting their professions because they're burnt out from like doing a bunch of paperwork and just like all these kinds of elements. And so, of course, I think so that's definitely one of the things that's been motivating me recently. I mean, specifically around how do we take the healthcare system and how do we just make it more optimized? It's not about replacing doctors or replacing nurses, but actually making them, just supercharging them to be able to do more while also kind of retaining their own humanity in the process. And so that's something that definitely motivates me.
Daniel, one of the last questions I love to ask guests on the show is very much who's on your Mount Rushmore? And for investors, it's which investors are on your Mount Rushmore? For you, 4 people, 4 investors, greatest of all time. Who are they?
I have to say, I mean, Peter Sarlin, I think, is quite an interesting one. He is the CEO of Silo AI, which got acquired by AMD. And he's kind of been an entrepreneur for a long time. I mean, he's giving back to the community in a very interesting way. So, for instance, he did this. He basically, I mean, I think he like donated X number of euros for basically bankrolling like 10 different AI professors to come from like various prestigious institutions in the US to come teach in Finland. And so I think that's a very tangible and fun way to actually give back. And I look up to this guy a lot. I think, I mean, when it comes to kind of more broadly, I mean, in terms of the content I consume, I mean, I've always kind of had a soft spot for Chamath Palihapitiya. I think he's definitely a character. I mean, I don't agree with all his views, but I think he has like a very surprisingly pragmatic approach to actually understanding the issues around him, and he's constantly diagnosing different things in his environment.
It's very interesting, and also the
opportunities created.
The way that we get to see it almost in real time on All In is something that I thought I'd never be able to see ever from someone so prolific.
Yeah. No, agreed for sure. And then I think, I mean, I think the majority of the people that I do look up to on a more direct basis, or the other investors that I look up to, I mean, they're kind of more like friends of mine actually. So I I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I do have to say, I mean, for instance, shout out to my previous boss, Mikael Myllymäki, who was the CIO of Helen, my previous company. And so this guy, I mean, he talks like a machine gun. He thinks faster than most people. Like, it's absolutely crazy to hear this kind of conversation with founders.
I love it.
Instantly catches on to kind of what's being explained to him. Super smart guy. So shout out to Mikael Myllymäki. But yeah, no. I think those would be some of the kind of topics in my mind.
I love it. My friend, this has been a pleasure. I can't wait to do this in person. Well, I will have to come to you, or you will have to come to me, but we'll make it happen.
Let's absolutely make it happen. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in London when I visit.
Oh, God, you're going to kill me. Daniel, pleasure. Speak to you soon, my friend.
Bye-bye.